He's a sawing and jawing and doing his thing.
Hey Woodworkers, this is your buddy Dave coming to you from the Saws and Jaws workshop. This is the place where you get to learn from my past, present, and future woodworking mistakes. And in this episode, I'm going to share a really good one with you and one that's quite easily avoidable. Now, my mistake started during the glue up of a Gustav Stickley inspired book rack that I was building. Now, if you don't know who Gustav Stickley was, don't worry about it. Stick around and watch the next segment because we're going to do a bit of a history lesson on old Gustav, and we're going to talk a little bit about the project piece before we actually get into the learning segment. So, does that sound good? Great. Let's get this thing going. Now, what you need to understand is that my little woodworking misadventure started one afternoon in the Saws and Jaws workshop when I suddenly developed a very bad case of clamps. Okay, so this is the piece I just finished working on, and we're going to talk about that in our lesson. Just wanted to say a few words. The design for this came out of a April 2008 Fine Woodworking magazine. The author of that article was a fellow by the name of Greg Paolini. So Greg, a little shout out to you. Great design. Greg's was about twice as high and twice as long. He had two sets of shelves. I've only got one. I cut it down a little bit so a small child could move it around easily in a room. From a skill building perspective, we talk about stretching ourselves, building our skills. I counted them. This has about 17 different woodworking skills in it, so you can really stretch yourself by building this little project. So Greg said he was influenced by Gustav Stickley, and in particular his number 74 book rack. So I'm going to have Barry fly one of those in right now so we can take a look at it, but dude, don't hit me in the head like you did in practice. Okay, so that's what a Stickley number 74 book rack looked like. Gustav Stickley in the early 1900s influenced what was then called the American Craftsman movement. We know it today maybe as the arts and crafts movement. And as well, Gustav thought all furniture should have a mission. It should be functional, comfortable, and the furniture is also referred to as mission, the mission style as well. So we'll see at the end of this episode if we've accomplished the mission that Gustav set out. Anyway, let's get started. Okay, so once we had all the pieces finished, it's time to do the glue up. So again, a bit of a challenging glue up here with a bunch of tenon faces going into a through mortise. So I did a little demonstration piece for you. So this is what the through mortise and tenon joint looks like. So again, this little guy here simulates the mortises that we have in the front face of this piece, and this is the tenon. So this is the V-shelf with a tenon on each end, and a proper mortise and tenon fit, what you're looking for is a joint that you can put together, you can slide together with just your bare hands. You don't want to have to beat on that with a hammer. So let's demonstrate the fit. So start shaking. Yeah, there we go. So just like that, that's how that mortise and tenon fits together very nicely. So you can see it's not going to shake out. I can't shake it out, but I could certainly pull it apart by hand. That's perfect for gluing. So again, dry fit. Off you go. So, as part of my clamping plan for this piece, I had dry fit everything. I also had clamped it together to make sure the joints were tight, and that was part of my clamping plan. So, I had a choice though. I could use a very heavy set of clamps like this, beautiful sliding clamps, but man, they weigh about 5 to 7 pounds. They're kind of awkward to use. Or I could have the second choice. I could use a clamp that looks something like that. It's a lot lighter. This thing only weighs about a pound, maybe a pound and a half, but it's a little bit easier to handle. And my clamping plan called for 4 of these. So I was going to put one under each tenon, and then one on either side on the bottom. So I felt from the dry fit that would be a pretty good plan. I could probably get away with that. So had my clamps laid out as part of the plan. Next step, glue together the first 3 tenons into the first 3 mortises on this front face. So if we represent it like that, that's the front face there. So what I did is I had my bottle of glue, I squirted some glue on here, and then I started to brush the glue on all 4 faces. No problem there. And quite easy to get 3 faces or 3 tenons into their respective mortises like that. That was easy peasy, no problem there. Now, the next step of the glue up, as you can imagine, a little more challenging. So imagine this piece is sitting up like that. So now I've got 3 tenons sitting up like that. And the challenge was then to, again, apply glue to all the tenon faces, or the faces of the tenons, and then fit this next end piece over the mortises over the tenons, and then try to pull them together. So the first mistake I made was I tried to glue these, to spread glue on these with a glue bottle while they were vertical like that. Again, that's a mistake. Don't make that mistake. Instead, get yourself a little container like this, squirt a little glue into it so that you can take your time. You can get some glue on the brush and then brush that onto those tenons. That works a lot better. In any event, I managed to get glue on all 3 of these tenons, and I then took the end piece, we'll simulate it with this template, and I tried to start to fit. So I had to kind of jiggle around the 3 tenons to fit in the mortises of this last end piece, and then I tried to start to tap them together, and what I realized was, wow, that glue started to set up very fast. So did the best I could, just kind of pounding them in by hand, flip the piece over, and here's where the teaching moment comes in. As I applied the clamps, that all worked pretty good. So I had a set of clamps on there like that, had one there, had one here, and then one on either end here. Then I went around the piece, one clamp at a time, slowly tightening them, and I could feel the joint pull together. However, it started to really give me some resistance. That glue started to set up very fast. As I said, the wood in the tenons started to swell, and before I realized it, I was putting so much pressure on these things that I actually did force a couple of little dents in it. Bring that in a little closer to you. So there's some dents in the wood right there, little dent. Not a bad one, survivable. So what I should have done, so let me step back, so I didn't think this out clearly. What I would do in hindsight, I would have tried to use something called a clamping pad. And a clamping pad simply goes on the wood like that, so that when you apply the clamps to it, the clamping pad spreads the force of this little guy out, so you probably won't bruise your wood. Now you saw the problem there. It's kind of awkward to do that with one-handed while you're trying to set up a clamp. Imagine trying to do that with 2 clamping pads. You wish you had a third hand. Well, you do. I used blue tape as a third hand. Blue tape is our friend in the shop. Simply speaking, take that guy like that, a couple of pieces of blue tape, doesn't take a lot. Align it with the tenon. Now your hands are free. Do that on both sides. Now your hands are free to apply the clamps and start to pull the joint together. So I still think I could have done it with these lighter clamps if I had used the clamping pad to spread the pressure out. So yeah, no big deal. Like I said, a couple of bruises there. It's a piece for my granddaughter. It's going to stay in her bedroom. I'm very happy with the way it turned out. So really, in review, Clamping plan, very important. Have your clamps laid out, have your clamping pads. Everything should pull together, and the next time you glue something up, I'm sure it'll come together just fine. So, the finished piece, as I said, looked a little bit like that. So that's the side view of it. So if we want to put Gustav's mission to the test, will it hold books? Well, if I assume this little piece of wood here is a book, yeah, I would say that works. I would say, yeah, little magazine on there. Maybe put another book on. Yep, I'd say that's going to do just fine. So, Gustav, mission accomplished. Okay, well that's it for this episode of Saws and Jaws Workshop. Let's just do a quick review on what we learned in that lesson. Number one, the clamping plan. Very important to have a plan ready before you put the glue on, because those joints are going to swell up pretty quickly. Big part of our clamping plan is, of course, our little buddy, the clamping pad. Don't forget your third hand, the blue tape. And very important, the choice of clamps that you use. So I went with those very lightweight clamps, and I ended up denting my project. So to avoid that, I think in future, I'm going to go with the heavier clamps, with the wider jaws, the longer jaws. Just overall, those clamps will be able to apply force a lot smoother, so those joints come together a lot better. So future projects, that's what I'm going to do, and I recommend you do the same. So next time on Saws and Jaws Workshop, bit of a treat. We're going to talk about woodworking jigs that we use here in the Saws and Jaws Workshop. I'm looking forward to sharing that with you. So, hey, that's it. Really enjoyed having you folks here. And until next time, keep making some sawdust.